20 years or so. So you see both of these possibilities. So what I want to argue is actually that it's not the material itself that is the problem, it is the endless consuming pursuit that is ultimately the corrupting force. And it doesn't have to be that way. So the idea is that everything material is obviously finite and it's limited, and there are things in the world that are unlimited, that are endless and are infinite, like love and compassion and spirituality and generosity. And I think we have to ask questions about what are the driving forces behind materialism. How do we make materialism generous? Is the drive towards material because we want to be wealthy, because we want to have fancy toys, or is it because that once we have those materials we can actually make the world a more just and compassionate place? And just in conclusion, I want to say that, you know, Judaism came into the world by came into being in the world by insisting that the non-material was the greatest possible reality. And I also see that potential in Hollywood, because Hollywood at its core is not about material. Material are the tools and the means by which Hollywood works. But Hollywood is about imagination and fantasy and storytelling and identity and history. And those things are not limited. They're not restricted. They're filled with possibility, and they can actually be incredibly soul-nourishing.
Thank you. Our third panelist is Eric Garcetti. Council member of the 13th Council District, Mr. Garcetti was unanimous.
Or public safety or pollution or economic development, and to be asked such an abstract question was actually something I embraced the opportunity, because I think all of us in our lives need that nourishment. And I wasn't sure, we kind of figured out the order just before coming here, and it's actually fitting that I'm third, because I think we had point and counterpoint, and I'm going to try to make a little bit of a synthesis. It was what I was going to say anyway, between what our first two speakers said. A few years ago, I was gone this year for the Laker parade, doing my naval service, but a few years ago when the Lakers had won 3 titles in a row, I got on the bus with the Lakers. I snuck on. I think the council members were supposed to be on another bus, but as a big Lakers fan, I got up there, and Shaq gave me a whole bunch of his new CDs and asked me, he didn't know who I was, and just said, here, throw these to the fans. So I was up on the top of the double-decker throwing Shaq's new CDs as we went down Figueroa, celebrating an amazing, incredible accomplishment. The world champions, the very best basketball players anywhere in the world. And that day, while it was amazing and it was heady, and as an Angelino, I loved it, and we had struggled and nobody knew if it was going to happen, and we achieved this great thing, the folks that were lined up kept repeating one chant, and it was, "For Pete, for Pete, for Pete, for Pete." We had achieved the three-peat, and yet it struck me that here we are at the moment where we should be celebrating after 364 days of not knowing. This should be the day we celebrate. We should be engaged, and yet we wanted the next one instead of taking this day to enjoy that. Think about this in politics. The moment Barack Obama is elected, who's going to challenge him 4 years later? Not what are we going to do in these 4 years to govern together, whether we're Democrats or Republicans or independents. I wonder who's going to be next. Will it be Palin? Will it be Mitt Romney? Who's going to challenge him? Will he go down so far that somebody will challenge him from the Democratic Party? We live in a state of constant desire and always looking for what is next instead of pausing here in the moment. So I think Rabbi Shmuley's point is an important one. We were asked to assess the soul of America, which is a really difficult thing to assess. I don't know how many of us in this room could articulate what the soul of America is. But I do think that there are elements of what has been defined as American that are very parallel with the excesses of materialism. Think about it. Both have a constant yearning and restlessness over a more settled or satisfied peace. That's the story of the American soul. It is the story of materialism. There's an emphasis on consumption, on expansion, over an internal reflection and acceptance. In both materialism and the soul of America, there's a focus on the tangible, the material, over the transcendent or the spiritual. And so in many ways, a study of our soul here in America is the study of material things. But let me dig in a little deeper to the idea of the second part of this question, which is materialism. Because materialism really refers to two different things. There's materialism, the philosophy, and materialism, the practice. Now, as a philosophy, materialism came about in the Enlightenment, when science came about, when we started looking at real things, or what we thought were real things, understanding the matter, physical or processes that happened in a chemical or scientific nature. And this was juxtaposed to the idea of idealism or spiritualism. It's materialism rooted in real things versus this kind of touchy-feely idealism or spiritualism, which is not tangible. We can't prove it. We don't know what it is. We've talked about it for thousands of years, but suddenly, as technology came about, we could look more at the material world. And it's interesting when we see the evolution of materialism, what the first counter-reaction to it was. I found a poem by Wordsworth, who, when the Industrial Revolution was hitting in the late 18th century in Britain, wrote many poems about kind of the lost soul of humanity, but soul of Britain, which you could kind of transpose to the soul of America right now. The first 4 lines of a poem he wrote were, "The world is too much with us, late and soon. Getting and spending, we waste our powers. Little we see in nature that is ours. We have given our hearts away, a sordid boon." Talking about the getting and the spending that he saw transforming, moving from an agrarian life into the cities, struck him as us losing part of what the soul was to be human. As a condition, materialism means something related but somewhat different as well. It's been described here, it's what we all know, it's about things. It's the idea of retail therapy. When we're feeling bad, go shopping. And who in this room hasn't felt better when they've gone shopping when they're a little bit down sometimes? It's the possession of things. And when you look at America today, 70% of our economy is based on the idea of getting people to buy things, which in turn helps people have jobs and support their families and be able to have, hopefully, a life that transcends those things, but is also dependent on them. Now, what's interesting when we hear that our economy is 70% based on consumer spending, we think, well, that must be something that's new with these modern values that's just evolved. And I looked at the data today, and I couldn't go back any farther. I couldn't find anything farther back than 1947. But the economy was almost 70% consumer spending in 1947. So I think sometimes we idealize a past golden age that never was, where we didn't focus so much on things, where we somehow lived a life that was more spiritual or idealistic, when in reality this has been something that's with us for a while. In the last 100 years, our real money salaries have all increased, our household salaries and our household income, and we now spend 3 times more on household goods than we did in 1903. So we certainly are around more things, but there's also been a continuation of them. And I would say, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But it's that tension that was described up here between, do I really want that? Do I go for that? It's kind of a do or dienu moment, if you will. And it gets to the commodization of the self. And this may be the first time Jay-Z has been quoted here in the shul. But when you think about how those that we look up to begin to talk about not just the material things, but you yourself, and you look at Hollywood stars and others who become essentially a product. I'm reminded of the line where he says, "I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman." And yet when we look in history, too, there has been this throughout America. It's not new that we worship Warren Buffett and Bill Gates. There are poems and songs and countless sayings around the Rockefellers. We know what it was like to go back and to see that in American history. It's been a value. And what I want to conclude my remarks with in the last kind of third of this isn't necessarily a bad thing. We've lost some big and simple questions, I think, in how we approach life, all of us. And we are faced now with materialism in a new age, the digital age. I think all of us have heard the radio reports and articles written recently on, is the internet making us dumber? are our gadgets making us stupider too? And though I appreciate Shmuley's criticism of the 4th generation iPhone, he does have it. But we all...
Would you believe that Steve Jobs gave it to me to promote it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I would.
In the digital age, there's this criticism that because everything is instantaneous and an inch thick, that we've lost our depth. My experience is the opposite. There are people in this room that are here tonight only because of our digital tools and social networking, where they read where we were going to be and saw that on Facebook or Twitter and made it here. And in fact, Facebook and Twitter is just the old-fashioned thing we've always done. Social networking is the new term, but it's the same thing we did around the well, the same thing we did at the market in the olden days. It's the same thing we did at shul. It is the coming together and actually talking with one another and interacting with one another brought to us all in the modern age in a much easier way. To conclude the thoughts of how we transcend this, though, there's nothing fantastic in my mind about materialism and nothing ultimately destructive. But there can be something mysterious about materialism. Idealism can be as vacuous as materialism, if you think about it for a moment. If you think of Dostoevsky has a great quote, a paraphrase, "It's easy to love humanity. The difficult work is learning to embrace your neighbor." We can think of those idealists around us who love world peace and love changing things, but don't know how to interact with themselves or their neighbors or their co-workers. And so idealism can be as vacuous as materialism. Vice versa, I would say materialism can be as rewarding and as transcendent as idealism can be. Who hasn't felt that, the complete wonder, the first time you touch an iPad and see it come on? Or eat an incredible new recipe that you're trying for the first time? Or a first kiss? These things are physical, material. They are in the realm of matter, but they transcend. So what I want us to do is to stop thinking about the material versus the spiritual/idealistic. Take the spiritual out and put it in the middle. Now we have the idealistic and the materialistic, and both can lead to the spiritual. Because it is through the balancing of both of those and the understanding, for me, it is not the what. It is whether we push ourselves to understand the why and the how. The wonder of how material things work. Whether it's a thought in our brain, whether it is that Google gives you that answer right away in a way that your mind can't, or whether it is an idealistic thought that leads you to understanding how action and being of this world is the only place that idealism can be enacted to transcend to the spiritual. So to conclude, I don't begrudge you a single possession you have as long as you take your materialism seriously and you seek to understand things through it. Part of seeking to understand the deepest mysteries is knowing that you will arrive at some truths and also arrive at some things you simply can't understand. And without engaging with the material and that wonderment, you will never get to the truly spiritual. And to me, that's the most deeply satisfying path of all.
Again, and talking to God, is the founder and leader of Nashuva, the Jewish spiritual outreach movement. Her new book, Hope Will Find You, will be out this September. She was in the first class of women to enter the conservative rabbinical seminary, was named one of the 50 top rabbis in America by the most important magazine in the world, Newsweek. The only ones that listed 50.
Another quote from Midrash Tanchuma, Pekude. Are you with me? At the time of conception, God commands the angel who's in charge of the spirits, of the souls. God says, where's the angel who's in charge of all the souls? And God says to that angel, bring to me such and such a spirit. For all spirits which are to enter the body exist from the day of creation of the world until the earth shall pass away. So every soul that would ever enter a human body already exists, because every soul that would ever enter body is already up there with God. Then God orders the spirit to enter the seed, semen. But the spirit answers, Lord of the world, I am content with the world where I have lived since you did create me. Do not let me enter this putrefied drop, for I am holy and pure. So the soul is begging God, don't make me enter that putrid drop of semen, because I'm happy here where I am holy and pure. And God says to the soul, the world into which you enter is more beautiful than this world. How's that possible? That God says to the soul, the world that you're about to enter is more beautiful than this world in the heavens. How's that possible? It can only be possible because there's something about living in the material world. There's something about the soul being embodied in this world that makes it even more precious than living in heaven, in the world of eternity, in the world of potential. How's that possible? Because the soul now doesn't live in potential. It lives here in matter, and it needs its tools to affect change, to do good things, to help people, to save people, to make things straight, to make things right. The soul gains an advantage by entering this body. But you know what happens? The soul arrives in this body, and now there's a conflict, right? Because the soul has its yearnings and its desires, and the body has its yearnings and its desires. And maybe the soul wants to be nourished in one way, but the body wants something else. And that's where the rabbis, I think this is the most brilliant little metaphor or midrash, and I just like to share this for you. Okay? It says, all the labor of man is for his mouth, yet the soul is not filled. Back to the void, back to the feeling that we can never be filled because there's this emptiness. And you can have everything in the world and still feel empty. And the rabbis understood this, and the Torah understood this, and it's part of what it means. It's part of the tragedy of what it means to be a human being. Rabbi Hanina ben Yitzchak said, the soul is insatiable for Torah and for good works. And here's the human problem. It's like a villager, a poor little peasant who married the daughter of a king. A peasant marries a princess. Whatever the peasant brings to her, she regards as nothing, for she's a king's daughter. So the peasant brings her, here, look, I bought you a ring, I bought you a blouse, I bought you a dress, I bought you some pots and pans. And to her it's nothing, because she's already had it all, and those things don't mean anything to her. So with the soul. If all the delights of this world are brought to her, they are nothing to her, for she belongs to the world above. And that's the human tragedy, is we keep thinking that we could buy things for our soul. We could buy her a nice TV and a new iPhone and a new car and new electronics and a new computer and new makeup and new clothing, whatever, and we think we can make her happy that way. But it's all nothing to her, because that's not what fills her. And our task as human beings is to figure out what it is that fills her. And that's the paradox of being a human being, is trying to figure out that question. What is it that will nourish her, that will sustain her. And it has to do with the bigger picture of seeing the depth and the connection and the love and the relationships and what's true and what's real in life. And in those ways, we can fill her, we can teach her, we can nourish her. And until we learn how to do that, and it's a lot easier, as you said, to put a Band-Aid on her. It's a lot easier to go shopping with her. It's a lot easier to do that. It's much harder to look at the way you're living your life and to see that you're not really feeding the heavenly piece of you. The piece of you that seeks to do good in this world. The piece of you that really seeks to connect with others in this world. The piece of you that is just hoping and waiting for a chance to fulfill God's mission as to why she was placed in this particular body. That's my alarm. I'm done.
I want to thank the panelists. It's getting late, and I would like to already really engage them in some serious conversation. Because the honest to goodness truth is I listened very carefully to all four of you, and you really don't differ, even though you thought you differed. And I'll tell you why, Danielle. And then I'd like to hear your response in particular, and then Shmuley responding to that. Shmuley said money has no good or bad. It matters what you do with it. When you told about the story about the Clintons and their future wedding, I was reminded of a story as I'm listening to this story. You know, you're defending them because their foundation, I don't know if they give so much money. I'd like to know their tax return. And I'm serious about that because it's easy for me to write a check from the synagogue tzedakah fund. But what about my giving? That's a whole different ballgame. I was reminded of two rabbis, and Rabbi was passed away, Rabbi Kamenetsky was a great rabbi, lived in Monsey, New York, a survivor of the Holocaust, going to a fellow survivor's daughter's wedding. And this survivor made it big in America, really big. And the driver was a younger rabbi named Rabbi Wein, Rabbi Beryl Wein. And Rabbi Beryl Wein, after the wedding, and it was over the top, said, "This was outlandish." And he said, "No, it wasn't. It was his victory party against the Nazis. And don't criticize him, because he actually gives a lot of charity. And if this is what he wanted to do as his victory party, fine." So what I'm trying to get to is, how do you really differ with Shmuley? You're just saying, hey, it matters what you do with your materialistic possessions, with your money. But that's what Shmuley said. So would you please clarify, how do you differ if you do differ?
Because I think that I'm not arguing against the impulse for materialism. I think that, Shmuley says, we want all these empty things and we'll never be gratified, and there's a sense in which let's just try to avoid it. Let's just sort of suppress those instincts, and let's just push down, every time we walk by, a Saks window and we see shoes that we like, let's just push that impulse down. Let's ignore it, because that's not really our decent impulse. That's not really the deep spiritual, fulfilling impulse. But in fact, I think that impulse is okay if it eventually leads somewhere. So there's the idea that either, some people do their work in the world and they do it for good reasons because they're driven by greater ambition and they're driven by a sense of purpose in the world. And some people do their work in the world because they're driven by money and because they want to be successful. I don't think it matters at the end of the day if the work that you do in the world, if the impulse to dream and to achieve and to fulfill your purpose then leads to material benefit, and you then use that benefit to do something in the world, then I actually think it's okay. And secondly, I would argue that for some people, spirituality, intellectual inquiry, those very deeply stimulating, limitless pursuits are a means of achieving this higher purpose, but for other people, they have to satisfy their material ambitions first before they can get to that transcendent level. Not everybody can connect to a piece of Torah that tells them this is the way you should walk in the world. For some people, like maybe Steven Spielberg, initially, he just wanted to be a successful filmmaker. He wanted to make movies. And then the money came rolling in. And then, oh my gosh, I have hundreds of millions of dollars at my disposal. What can I do with this? Now it's like I'm even at this like higher, more transcendent purpose. There are all these possibilities now that weren't there before. Sometimes you need that material in order to realize some of these greater dreams. And as for the Clinton thing, I don't know how much they give out of their own pockets, but I see the Clintons as living a life of public service. They are deeply committed people to doing things in the world, and I think that it's admirable that they've created a foundation. I mean, this man, whether he gives his money or not, I would like to think that he does, and I would probably guess that he does. But he's fundraising hundreds of millions of dollars all over the world, and that's worth something. And it takes money. It takes money to make money. It takes money. It takes material to make things happen. And so I see it as a tool instead of a corrupting force. Can be, at least.
Shmuley, your response?
Well, let me begin by saying that today I met a Chabad rabbi who said to me, Naomi Levy is going to teach a lot of Torah. He actually said that.
Are you serious? Or you're lying?
Well, usually I'm lying, but on this one occasion, he really did say that. And you taught a lot of Torah. But, Naomi, you still have an old iPhone. I'm sorry.
That's right. So, I have the first iPhone.
Are you happy?
I'm very happy.
And she's satisfied, darn it.
I won't change it.
You know, I think that my dear friend Eric and my dear friend Danielle have been living in a different country for the past few years. Because, Eric, you can talk all you want about how nothing's new and there's always been these problems. Eric, we collapsed the world's greatest economy out of insatiability. And that only ever happened before, after the Roaring 20s, when people were just as greedy, when they lost all their values. It's only happened twice. There's another financial panics. This is unprecedented, where everybody has, thank God, a decent home, and it's not enough. It's almost never happened. It's happened with people like Alexander the Great. It's happened with people like Napoleon, and you always end up losing everything. Napoleon, after conquering the world, ends up living on, first on Elba, and then on a rock in the middle of the Pacific. So this has very few precedents, and they've always ended catastrophically. And you know what we learned? For the past few years, we learned absolutely nothing. Zero, nothing. The Wall Street bankers couldn't even give up their bonuses in 2008, which, by the way, was a gift from the government. Every penny they have. And they didn't even allow those bonuses and those bailouts to trickle down to the average person to keep their homes. We bailed out billionaires to have homes in the Hamptons, and that's immoral. That's immoral. And I commend publications like the New York Times that highlighted how banks like JP Morgan Chase and like Goldman Sachs were obstructing normal people from saving their homes, although they were given tens of billions of dollars, these banks, to bail people out, and they paid themselves bonuses. This is outrageous. It's wrong. And it's a corrupting force of materialism. As far as Hollywood is concerned, I'm going to remind my dear friend Danielle, we don't know a lot of healthy celebrities. Money and fame, it's killing them. I saw Michael Jackson die from this stuff. And I want you to know that this judge who put Lindsay Lohan in jail was an angel of mercy. She saved her life. I said many times that I wish Michael would have been convicted in 2005. I don't believe Michael was a child molester, by the way. I truly don't. But I wish he were convicted. Because he'd be alive today if he had been in jail, where he couldn't get all that garbage that killed him. That's what we've been reduced to. Judges have had to replace parents who also have no values. The only thing left are cops and judges to stop our young people from ODing. Hollywood is rancid almost to the core. There are some decent people, but they are the exception rather than the rule. Money and fame has destroyed the good people there. And they're not bad people. Lindsay Lohan's not a bad person. She's not hurting others. She's hurting herself. Janis Joplin, Marilyn Monroe, Elvis Presley, they were never bad. No one just stopped their excess. The greed was too much. And they're dead. You know, the Kabbalah Center says the way you stop people from having an evil eye is by putting a red string on your hand. Well, let me explain something. No silly, ridiculous red string is going to stop the evil eye. That's pure superstition. You may as well not walk under whatever, you know. It's like when I was a kid, everyone said if they stepped over me, I wouldn't grow. Tons of people stepped over me, and look, it didn't happen. At least somebody laughed. Okay. I wish my wife would laugh at that one. My wife is actually here with me from New Jersey. Hello, Debbie. That's you. Even my wife just turned around. That was odd. Okay. There's no silly string that can protect you from the evil eye. You know what the evil eye is? It's not some strange belief that I can cast like a voodoo power on you. The evil eye is, if you're wealthy, don't engage in conspicuous consumption. Keep it a little bit downplayed so that you don't make other people who aren't as successful feel bad about their lack of success. Then they'll not like you because you rob them of their dignity by making them feel like they're losers. That's the evil eye. If you flaunt your wealth, people are going to give you the evil eye. They're going to think, you made me feel bad about myself. I hope you fail. Could you imagine? The Kabbalah Center was telling people, and I'm not a big critic of the Kabbalah Center. I applaud a lot of what they do. It's been very good. But in this particular thing, taking advantage of susceptible people, saying, go ahead and drive a Ferrari and a Lamborghini and a Rolls Royce and drive it up to shul and get out with your eye candy girlfriend and put on that little piece of string, live with no values whatsoever, but have a red string on your hand. That's not Judaism. That's silly, stupid superstition. A final comment. Bill Clinton's legacy is a mixed one. I too am very impressed with the Clinton Global Initiative because when I was with my dear friend Glenn McGill, who took me to Zimbabwe where he runs a Christian relief organization, we met doctors. You remember that? It was on a Shabbos. I made this big Friday night for all of our Christian relief. We had the greatest Shabbos ever in Zimbabwe. And we met these doctors from Canada who had volunteered, and they said there's no doctors in Zimbabwe, people are dying, but there's so much medicine from the Clinton Global Initiative. That was amazing. But his legacy is mixed. And everyone's legacy is mixed. My legacy is mixed. Except Danielle Barron thinks it's entirely negative. But the fact is, come on, man.
Can I just ask you something?
Can I just finish this one little point?
Yes.
I mean, come on. Bill Clinton, you're rich because of the people. They voted you in. You didn't have 2 nickels to rub together before you became president. So now you go and you make a $6 million wedding? That's contemptuous of common people. It's wrong. I don't care how much money you have. I respect Warren Buffett, who is 1 trillion times richer than Bill Clinton, who tries to live just a little bit of a modest life. You know, Donald Trump was a good father. But as a role model to America, you know, golden toilet seats and all this stuff, that's shallow. It's vulgar. We're not vulgarians. A $6 million wedding is vulgar. So I conclude by saying that the Gera Rebbe instituted in Jerusalem, he instituted a law that if you were getting married, you could not have more than 200 people at the wedding because he didn't want them to become competitive the way they become in the Jewish community, these competitive weddings. So a super rich Jew who supported and gave a lot of charity comes to the Rebbe and he says, but Rebbe, come on, this doesn't apply to me. I paid for the yeshiva, I paid for the synagogue. I'm very rich. I can afford a big wedding. And the Rebbe said to him, since you're so rich, go and buy yourself a new Rebbe. Thank you.
So my big problem with everything you're saying is that, you know, okay, so materialism is horrible and corrupting. What do? I hate to quote Madonna and Shul, but come on, folks, we live in a material world. Like this, we have to look at some of the aspirations that we can, we need to approach materialism with aspirations so that we can use that. And quite frankly, I think it's the responsibility of people like you to teach this generation and other generations how to push past the egotism of materialism into something deeper, into how to use those things to be forces in the world. But we can't.
I'll jump in.
Jump in.
No, I think that that's always been Judaism's job. You know, Judaism's never been a religion that's opposed to materialism. Thank God, we're not an ascetic religion. We're a religion that loves food, that loves sex, that loves love, and we're a religion that says take the material world and sanctify it. That's it. It's good. It's good to have money. Use it well, enjoy it, rejoice, hitaneg b'tanugim, enjoy the whole thing, but just don't go crazy. Don't
Don't throw $5 million weddings.
Don't become obscene with it. There's a certain kind of material pornography.
Do you think it's obscene?
I think it's insane to spend, was it $5 million on a wedding? I think it's just a sad commentary on our society. But I'm much more interested in our community, and you know what? I'm not here to condemn them or not condemn them. I'm here for us to look at who we are and what we can be doing. And I think that often there's a Jewish flavor to this drive for success, whether it's what did you call it? The Holocaust survivors, what kind of party was it? Victory party. The color of nouveau riche. The drive that has nothing necessarily to do with just making money, but the drive, the bottomless drive of every minority to just say, like me. That drive, accept me, can be so insatiable that it takes over everything. And again, the good side of that is we have the most incredibly prolific people. I mean, the list of Jewish Nobel Prize winners, our movie makers, our writers, we're so prolific. The bad side is that it can drive us to the point of not being there in our lives, of not being there for our families. Did you see that movie, that Joan Rivers movie that just came out? Go see it. I think it's a great portrait of Jewish drive, unbridled. And it's just very fascinating. Just a hunger that's limitless. And not that I have anything against Joan Rivers per se, but I think that's just something that we as a people have to keep in check, is the desire, just bottomless desire for acceptance, recognition, fame, and for some of us it's money, for some of us it's some other way of being accepted, loved, needed, whatever it might be. And how do we live our lives in check and in balance?
Eric, is there a responsibility of a leader like President Clinton and his wife, who are leaders in this country? Are they setting a standard that people who can't reach that standard are going to suffer trying to emulate? And what I mean by that is, I know way too many people who will spend a lot of money that they don't have for that wedding for their daughter, or their bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah for their son and daughter, whatever it is, and they go into debt. And who set the standard? Was there a sense of responsibility? Do you believe there is a sense of responsibility that might be missing in the equation?
And you're going to be quoted in the newspapers about this tomorrow, right?
It's fine. That was an Obama supporter, don't worry. No. Just kidding.
So go for it.
No, I'm kidding. I think it's good to recast this back to normal people, because too often we get caught up in discussions about materialism where people will never be. It is a dangerous driver when we see those that are the super successful and the super rich, but it's always incumbent upon us to have a normal conversation about something more normal. Those that do burst through to some higher strata, I do think absolutely have that responsibility. Contrast how Jimmy Carter has led his life, and the Clintons have done enormously good things, but Bill Clinton is a different person and lives a very different life and enjoys different things than Jimmy Carter does. And I think that contrast, and there's plenty of things we can disagree about both of them about, but in terms of the humility with which one needs to live their life always. To me, it's materialism needs work not to be corrupting. That's the important message. It needs work. Materialism as a condition, I kind of cast aside in my comments. So I wasn't referring to that as something that is the transcendent, but the material is something that transcends and that can get us to a spiritual place. And conversely, idealism, I think, needs hard work to be relevant. So, you can't just be some monk off someplace talking about what the world needs to do. But absolutely, I mean, in this day and this age, I mean, read The Great Gatsby in the 20s. It was the excesses in the midst of suffering that I think have a double perversion to them, and that we absolutely have responsibility. And not because of just how does it look to others. I want Chelsea Clinton to have a great wedding. I want her.
I wasn't invited, by the way.
I want her to have a great wedding, and I think she's going to miss out.
I just wanted to add one thing, which is, we're just about to enter Elul, and Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur are right around the corner, and maybe you've raised this whole thing for a very good reason, which is for us to do some serious soul searching about what is it that I personally have been wanting lately that I really don't need, and how can I curb that appetite? And just, when you say, Havienu Shalom Me'abakan Haaretz, how do I draw myself back from all the places that I'm yearning and desiring and get myself back into a place of humility, of focus, of...
Wow, okay.
I'm right across the street from the Baba for Rabbi. That's where I grew up.
Well, I come from an ancient legacy of Jews in Iran who sold falafel. So, and I wish it were true that...
Where'd you grow up? Be proud.
I grew up here in Los Angeles.
There you go.
Yeah. If God willing, you'll become mayor. I'm coming back, Eric. And I wish it were true that I cast this whole thing for the noble reasons you gave. I actually did it just to flog my new book on materialism.
At least he's on.
Available for purchase outside.
That's right. And
I didn't bring my
everywhere.
books.
But I want to put a question to Eric. I mean, come on. The country's suffering. People are being kicked out of their houses. California's got like 50 cents left to its name. And then you have a president of the United States blowing, I didn't even know this, blowing $5-6 million away. You got soldiers dying in Afghanistan. When they die, their widows get $12,000 to pay for their burial. And that's all the money they get. Unless most of the soldiers take out an insurance policy, they get another $250,000. But even $250,000, you got 2-3 kids. It's not going to last very long. That's what this wealthiest of all nations pays its dead soldiers who fight for liberty and to make sure that women aren't beaten in the streets in Kabul for showing their elbows. And then you have a president of the United States, and I'm not trying to be critical of Bill Clinton because I agree with Danielle. I have been very impressed with what Clinton has done in his post-presidency. That he's focused on some of the poorest regions. But I got to tell you, Danielle, I don't see that Bill Gates goes and blows tons and tons of money. He actually, what Bill Gates is doing with his life is incredible. This guy's given away about 70% of his wealth. Warren Buffett gave away 90% of his wealth. And I'm not trying to make comparisons here. I'm just saying, Eric, you're an elected official. Is it responsible for someone who is an elected official, or once was, and Hillary Clinton is she's the second most powerful human being in the United States. She's the Secretary of State, for goodness sake. To spend that much money when the whole country is suffering.
No, I agree. So I think, no, absolutely not. I think, in the high holidays this year, the rabbi told the story about when you have, if you had a dollar, should you give that dollar to one person or the penny to 100? And what was the right answer? And there's good arguments to be made. I ask this of friends sometimes: if you had $100, would you give $1 to 100 people or the $100 to one person? And the right answer, according to the rabbi in this case, over time has been that you give $1 to 100 people because it's the practice of giving that's more important than the impact on one person. That the world that we need to model is that we all do that all the time at whatever level we can to everybody. And when you think about the contrast, why I brought up Clinton versus Carter, is it's as important as the great things that you can do with the money that you can get from selling books and being a celebrity, it's as important to be out there with a hammer at a Habitat for Humanity site every single year. And I've seen President Carter out there. Once the cameras go away, he is there for the entire build. In fact, he stays there longer on the site than everybody. As people are leaving because they're aching and they're tired, he says, "Excuse me, brother, can you stay for a couple more hours?" And when the president asks you, you're not going to say, "Yeah, I was going to go home." That all of us, no matter where we get, that you have to have that balance between the work that you do as well as the ideals that you have. And you can't pay those ideals off by saying, "Look at all this good they did here, so this wedding is forgivable."
So it's late.
And I promised to end at 9 o'clock. Eric, you have to leave, I know that. So let me just sum it up. I think that we've all heard some fascinating discussion about the materialism in America. It is a challenge. It's always been a challenge. It's been a problem in Jewish thought throughout. But what's fascinating to me is America's challenge is the following. Thanksgiving is followed by what Friday? Black Friday. Thanksgiving was created to say what? Thank you for what we have. Black Friday is about what we don't have. That's the challenge. Fortunately, the Black Friday has taken greater news spot than the Thanksgiving. And I think we all will agree that the Thanksgiving is more important than the Black Friday. And if we don't figure that out, we're doomed. And that's what the panelists are trying to tell us. I think that we got to be aware that we are blessed. We live in a phenomenally blessed country. We're going through rough times. It's economically difficult, but we're a blessed country. With all the economic problems we have, we're still the wealthiest country in the world. And every morning we have to thank the Almighty for that. And we have to learn how to use that materialism to be able to do good, to transform ourselves into giving people. And I do think there's responsibility when you're living in the most prosperous country in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank the panelists on your behalf. Shmuley Boteach, in particular, for arranging, organizing, inviting the panelists, inviting me to be your moderator. I'm grateful for that. And have a wonderful, wonderful evening.
And everyone, just one, I'm sorry, just one very brief moment. I want to thank Rabbi Muskin and the Unusual of Century City. Please give me 30 seconds. And to Rona Satov, who organized this on our behalf. Just give me 10 seconds to say some proper thank yous. I want to thank my wife, Debbie, who is my partner in everything that I'm